Hi, everybody. Welcome to December's Artist WorkLab. Today, we're going to be talking about preparing for your taxes. I know we're super excited about it. It's one of those things that isn't fun, but we all have to do it, or we get in trouble. So I just wanted to take the moment. We're doing it a little bit differently this time. Our panel of experts is us this time instead of outside experts. And we feel that each one of us offers a different perspective and prepares our taxes differently, has different things that go into our taxes, and so we're sharing our knowledge, and we're really hoping that all of you have questions for us and can share some of the things that you do that help you file your taxes successfully, keep track of your expenses, create systems, things like that. And as a disclaimer, obviously, we're not tax professionals, so if you have any questions about preparing taxes or whether something is relevant to your particular circumstance, please consult a tax professional. So I get that out of the way. So my name is Jane Davila. I am the executive director of Metro Art Studios, where these take place. We are so grateful to be doing these in collaboration with the Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County and with the support of Connecticut Humanities. Metro Art Studios is a building in Bridgeport, Connecticut with a really varied amount of programming, including artist WorkLabs on a monthly basis that are on our YouTube channel every month, as well as in person. And we also have 41 artists in 38 studios. We have live music. We just have a bunch of really wonderful things. You should check out our website at metroartstudios.org. And I will turn it over to Kristin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristin Merrill. I'm the Director of Finance at Metro Art Studios. And I sort of have a mixed bag of professions. I am a jeweler and a sculptor, and I went to art school and graduated, and the way that I supported myself out of art school was working for galleries. And while I was working in galleries, I ended up on the business side of galleries and started eventually my own consulting business, working with artists and creative people on how to manage their finances, because I had learned it along the way. So I have a different type of background, and that is sort of a bookkeeper's sense of things, while I also have my experience as a jeweler and a sculptor and how I manage my own finances. So I hope I can help everyone here. And if you have any questions, even after this, please email me. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it out. I have been a resource for many, many, many artists, and I'm always available. I enjoy it, so please reach out.
That's good. It's good to find joy in what you're doing. Yes. Not just in the season, but generally. Hi, everyone. I'm Erika Wesley, the Executive Director of the Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County. We're an over 600-member organization that provides networking, capacity building, promotion, and other opportunities to artists, creative institutions, businesses all across Fairfield County. And so I have the purview, I think, of the nonprofit organization and how finances kind of come into play there. My husband and I started a nonprofit, so the startup work, as you know, is a little different than an organization that's been around for a while, so hopefully able to speak from both of those vantage points. All right.
Yeah. So just as an overview, according to the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, there are approximately 2.6 million artists working in the United States, and that covers fine artists, actors, musicians, everybody working in the arts, including cultural nonprofits. So that's a pretty large percentage. It actually makes up 1.55% of the entire workforce in the country. So it's not an insignificant group, but artists are 3.6 times more likely to be self-employed than the rest of the population. We don't like bosses. We like working for ourselves. I know. So some of the things that we're going to talk, I think the best way to approach it is to just go section by section, topic by topic, and at the end of each section we'll ask if anybody has questions for this part of that section, and then we'll move on to the next section. And so as an overview, I think Kristin can best describe how the various ways your business, because we are all businesses, right? We're all artists. We all are in business to make money, because otherwise, what are we doing? So there's different ways of setting up your businesses. And so there are different ways legally of being able to do that, and Kristin will be able to answer that a little bit better than any of the rest of us.
So I think a lot of us are probably sole proprietors. Is everybody here pretty much, I'm not sure if there's LLCs, but, so that is, you can be a sole proprietor if you're one person, and you file a Schedule C on your tax return with ultimately your income versus your expenses and your profit. One of the other options is an LLC, and that allows partners to be less liable. And at the end of the year, what happens is the income that the business creates is then divided among the partners as income for each of them. And then the final thing you could become, or you are, is a corporation. You're either an S Corp or a C Corp. And that's if you're much larger and you have multiple employees and you file an 1120 and pay corporate taxes that the business is really liable for. It's not so much on a personal level. I don't know if anybody has any questions about formation, or if you are already formed entity.
So I've asked this question to my accountant who prepares my taxes every year before, and I just want to see if I get a similar.
Sure,
What is the
I'll try.
difference, right? So if you are a sole proprietor,
Yeah.
and like, does it make a difference if you become an LLC? Like, is there one of the things that I asked her, because LLC was basically for a layer of protection. If I am, as a sole proprietor,
Right.
am already insured, like I have insurance.
Right.
She said it's just really a fee.
There's really
Have a
not,
fancy
I would say that
LLC.
there's not any difference other than you're going to have to pay an annual
And that's
fee,
exactly
like
what
they
she said.
said, as an LLC. Personally, I have been both. My consulting business was an LLC when I had it. Now I'm doing much more of my artwork, and so I dissolved that. But I would say the sole proprietorship is much simpler if you're trying to decide between the two. And I'm fully insured, so it really doesn't make much difference either.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
sure. Is there any other questions? Nope. I guess maybe we can move on unless anybody has any comments about.
I think the one thing that we want to talk about, the one thing we do want to talk about is that in order for the IRS to see you as a business person, we all see ourselves as business people, but you have to be, there are certain criteria, like as a general rule of thumb, your business should be trying to make a profit, right? That is your purpose. Otherwise, they consider you a hobbyist. And if you're a hobbyist, you're not able to deduct anything, and you still may have to pay taxes on your income, but you won't be able to get the deductions. So if you think about trying to earn a profit, that is one of the criteria. You should be able to demonstrate that you're actively working toward that. And I've been told, I work with an accountant. He does my taxes every year. He's done my taxes for 30 plus years. And I prepare all of my numbers and all my documents for him, but I trust him to do all the hard part of it. And he has told me that the kind of the golden rule, and I know that there are different opinions about this, is that the IRS is looking to see that you make a profit, even if it's $1, for 3 out of every 5 years, right? So a really good accountant is good at finding as many deductions as possible so that your net income is really low, and so you don't owe that much in taxes, right? That's the goal of everybody paying taxes, is to owe as little as possible. But if you are constantly in the red and you get a refund every year as a self-employed person, then eventually the IRS will say, you're not trying hard enough to make this profitable. You are no longer a business. You are now a hobby, and you are no longer able to deduct expenses. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Although I don't love paying taxes, I view myself as a business person. I like living in a society where fire trucks come if my house is on fire, and ambulances come if somebody gets hurt. And so I understand that I need to pay taxes for things like that. So I am happy to pay some taxes. I just don't want to pay a lot of taxes. So I know you had, yeah.
Yes, I have a slightly different opinion in that if you, oh, sorry, do you have a question?
Yes.
What?
So when it comes to deductions between the sole proprietor versus the LLC, do you have access to more deductions as an LLC? Or is it the same thing all around?
Same thing.
Okay.
Yep, same.
You can deduct the fee.
Right.
The fee that you
Yes,
pay.
that
to
you
be
pay.
in the LLC.
Yeah.
So you gotta pay that fee to deduct it.
Yeah, I pay that fee too.
So I will say, though, that if you do several different things, and if you have different businesses like I do, I have my, I had my consulting business, I had my jewelry business, and if one is more profitable than the other, I would, at the end of the year, I may find that I break even though I've set aside, I've paid taxes, I've had a lot of income for my consulting, but my jewelry business has lost money. So the IRS has never looked at me, and I mean, I will say it's been 30 years probably of maintaining that sort of equilibrium where there's not a lot of income. Maybe it shows that I made $1,000, but my consulting business did really well, and my jewelry business did not do so well. I think that the chances of you being audited because of that are way less. So that's just a difference of opinion and how you work. If you have two different businesses or more, I think that it's okay to take the appropriate loss if you really did lose money on your art expenses, taking valid expenses, I should say. So, and yeah. Do you have any comments?
I do actually, because I think what's coming up for me is encouraging people prior to selecting one of these designations to really sit down and figure out how you want to make money. Like, what are the possible revenue streams? So I'll say, as a writer, I'm often approached for volunteer opportunities. And so it wouldn't necessarily fit into income. So I had to decide, what does it cost me to host a writing workshop for 20 kids, 50 kids, 100 kids, and to really press people to pay. And so I think depending on the type of artistry that you have, you may need to really sit with someone else and figure out what that market number looks like, what the industry standard is, and don't be afraid to charge people. You can have a few volunteer opportunities, throughout the year, but I think the goal really is to make money. So don't shortchange yourself and walk with purpose and kind of figuring out what makes the most sense for your financial goals.
And speaking of volunteering, I find it really useful when people ask me to volunteer, to lecture, or to teach or something, where I can say that I have a set number every year that I am willing to donate in volunteer hours, and I've already hit it this year, or I've already committed to it this year. And that's a really easy, nice way of saying no without feeling guilty. Yeah, and it's true. Okay, so we're going to move on to, if there's no questions, we'll move on to tracking systems. And the stereotype is a shoebox, and that is perfectly acceptable as long as you keep all of your receipts in the shoebox. I use a filing drawer with hanging file folders with different categories, and I actually throw all the receipts in there. My husband and I are both artists, so we each have to file a Schedule C. We have to keep all of our expenses and income separate, even though we're married filing jointly. We each have a different Schedule C for each of our businesses, so we have to keep everything separate. I've got him so well trained at this point. He does his initials on the top of every one of his receipts and then just puts it on my desk at home, and so it's perfect. And then I just keep everything in the drawer. And at the end of the year, when I go to do my taxes, I just pull one folder out at a time, add up all the numbers, and I've got everything pretty much right at hand. Because we live in an increasingly paperless world, I don't get mailed bank statements anymore. So unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to do this without doing this, but at the end of the year, I sit and I print out all of the statements of the entire year worth of statements. It's so annoying. And I have 4 different bank accounts for different, like business, home, whatever. So I've got it all all of that. It just takes like a whole day to do all the printing and all the organizing and figuring it all out. But it tends to work for me, and I figure if it's working, then it's not broken. And I would love to be a person that sits and types in all my expenses every month so that all I have to do is like print out a report at the end of the year, but I am not that person. I am a person with a file drawer.
I think, Jane, I think you're the norm.
Yeah.
I really do. Because I will say that, so I've done both for different businesses. I've kept all of the books on a monthly basis using QuickBooks, balanced the accounts at the end of the month. And I think it really, really depends on volume. You know, if you don't, you know, I personally probably have maybe 200 or 300 sales a year, and it just depends on how much those are. The way that I track mine, which is a very simplified method, is I have a beautiful sales pad that has my identity on it and my address and everything, and I just fill that out. It's a duplicate one. Fill it out for every transaction, regardless if it's barter, regardless if I'm sending something to a gallery for consignment. It's all in that pad, and that is my tracking system. If I lose the pad, I mean, I would have to go to my bank account. But at the end of the year, I take my pads, that's my income, so I really don't have to do a whole lot of work. It's all there. And my expenses are, like you, saved in a folder. This is now what I'm doing with my business currently. And I just go through and figure out all the expenses. I don't do anything with my checkbooks. I don't, because I know exactly what I've spent. It doesn't matter whether it's a credit card or a check. The receipt is that's your backup. I would recommend that on every receipt you write on it what you were doing. I think it's very important. If you ever are audited and it's been, you know, several years, you probably won't remember. And any auditor who looks at your receipts and sees so much information, they're going to be like, okay, this person's good. You know, they really won't dig. And having been audited, not for my jewelry business, but from another, it's tricky, and they can be very opinionated. So you want them to like you. So that's my system. It's a really simple system, you know. But I also believe that if you have so many transactions in a month, that it is really important. You could use QuickBooks Online. I would recommend that. It's very simple. I mean, I won't say it's super simple. If you have any technological background, you can do it, especially online. It's all in the cloud, so you don't have to worry about losing anything. You could look at it daily, kind of a no-brainer on your phone. I would recommend that for anybody who wants to go that route.
Yeah, I would say the Cultural Alliance, we use QuickBooks. Most of the nonprofits that I've worked for or run have used QuickBooks.
We do too.
Yeah, it's so much easier, so highly recommend. We do have a bookkeeper, and our organization is small, so I will also encourage people to get the type of support you need to have a checks and balance, because anything can happen to you where you're unable to provide yourself with the quick information pull that you need. So having a bookkeeper is really helpful for us. Every month we do go over our expenses. Of course, we have a lot of volume with renewals and memberships, so it makes it a little bit easier. And he's very happy to barter. So I won't give his name now, but he's a great guy. So if you have some kind of business that might be beneficial to him, you know, he's not necessarily charging us a lot. He loves what he's doing, and he really believes in community. So I highly recommend finding people who can help assist you financially so that you're getting that support and you're able to get an expert, because I'm not the best at any of that. So it's good to have someone who is.
I'm just curious. Do you as a writer, do you have income, and do you just file a Schedule C on that? Personally, I'm just talking about. Yes. Okay, so that's what you do.
Yeah.
And how do you track your business expenses? Because I think that business is probably a little bit more similar to our audience, you know, just as a smaller business.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. We're rolling. So my husband, he's great at numbers. So we do just spreadsheets. So for me, it's not volume. I don't get a lot of bookings per year, but I charge a lot. So he's really good about just having a spreadsheet system, and so we go over it quarterly, which
Wow.
based on,
That's impressive.
well, it's more my level of,
Yeah.
I like to
Control.
know. Well, clarity is key, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
things that you don't put on your calendar as an artist, you lose sight of. And so for us, it's just like putting it on the calendar every quarter, good, bad, or indifferent. Let's figure out what's happening, and it works for the two of us. And I think for other artists that do have a much smaller business model, it's good, again, just to have forecasting. So we have a goal at the beginning of the year. So if we're checking in quarterly, then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I have room for one other thing so we can hit that benchmark, and generally it kind of works out. So that's a good question.
So yeah, at the end of the year, I've got stacks of 1099s, so that form that you get when you freelance and you work for a lot of different places. And you're supposed to get one anytime you make over $600. So I typically have to fill out is it a W-4, W-2? W-2, yeah.
No,
A
W9.
A W-9, yeah. I fill out a W-9 for someone that I'm working for. I have a whole bunch of one-offs where I work for somebody once and then I don't work for them for 5 years because I'm lecturing or teaching somewhere. And I have to keep track of the 1099s when they come in. But if a gig is less than $600, they're not required to give me a 1099. So that's why I print out my bank statements, because I can go back and look. But I also keep every single gig I have on my calendar on my phone. So the first place I start is actually there, because I can say, okay, so I did something on January 13th, and I'll go to the bank account and I'll look to see, and I probably should keep a notebook and write down, every piece of income that's coming in. I don't do that. I get really distracted easily, and so I don't do that. But I've got like a backup on top of a backup so that I can check a bank account versus a calendar versus a contract, because there's a place in the filing cabinet for contracts as well. I also wanted to mention that there is a really interesting program that I remembered today that I knew about before but had forgotten about, called Artwork Archive. And Artwork Archive is a subscription, now it's a subscription-based software program, and they have 3 tiers of pricing, and obviously with escalating things that you can get for it. But the thing that's really cool about it, it's meant for fine artists, and it keeps track of expenses and income, but it also keeps track of your work. It's like inventory for your work. So if you have work that's lent out to a gallery, or it's at a show somewhere, or you've entered it somewhere and you're waiting to hear back, it keeps track of that too. What is the work physically? When did you make it? How big is it? All the details about it. And where is it physically in this moment? And where is it going next? So it's kind of like an all-encompassing piece of software that keeps track of all of your inventory, finances, all the everythings. And it's a really good piece of software. I haven't used it, but I do know people who do use it. So some of the types of taxes. Oh, do we have any questions on that section, on like tracking systems? Anyone want to share what kind of tracking system you use?
Yeah, mine's more of a share than a question. So I have QuickBooks Online.
Mm-hmm.
I was using QuickBooks Self-Employed before that. It was a nightmare. Because QuickBooks Self-Employed wasn't online, so I couldn't track the same way.
Right.
But the thing that I'll say about QuickBooks Online, the thing that I hate is that they keep increasing the fee every year, which is really annoying. It's a write-off, but you still gotta pay for it, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I like about QuickBooks Online is all of my accounts are connected to it, so it's just a matter of going in and categorizing that way.
Right.
And you can actually put notes in every single one. This was from. So I'll put what gig it was from if a check comes through.
Mm-hmm.
I also almost always do remote deposits when I receive checks, or it comes through through Zelle. Most places don't pay through Zelle, but it's like either electronic or I get a check and I do a remote deposit. So when I have to cross-check, I can always go back to that account and pull up the check if I didn't put a note in QuickBooks.
Right.
The other benefit of QuickBooks is that you can scan your receipts. So you actually, because I'm going to tell you, I've been going through my paperwork and purging, and a lot of my receipts are disappeared.
Yeah, I know,
They fade out, right?
Yeah,
So-
they're on that heat paper, yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of times, depending on what system the stores or whatever vendors you're working with use, you might end up going back 3 or 4 years and you can't even read the receipt.
Right.
And it could have been like a big purchase, but you now can't, you don't have any kind of digital. So one of the benefits of an online system or something digital is you can actually scan those images. There's a million options. There's the Neat Desk, which I don't even know if people use that anymore, but the Neat Desk was one of the things that you could scan your receipts and it would automatically categorize them into buckets for you.
Wow.
And then on top of, you just brought up Artwork Archive, there's another company called Dubsado. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it.
No.
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
You've heard of it, right?
They even design websites on it, creative.
Exactly. So Dubsado is similar to Artwork Archive, where it is it's set up for creatives, and I think it's like a mom and pop. Like they started out very small. It's a small family, and this was something that was important to them, so they created it. And now I think they've been established for a little more than 10 years now. Not as big as Artwork Archive, but they have a system where they manage creative, all of your gigs. They do your invoicing. They do the bookkeeping. It's a system set up for creatives, and it's called Dubsado. So
How do you
that's
spell
another
that?
option. It's DUBSADO, I believe.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
So
Yeah.
to add on to that's a cool system that actually automates your whole business for you. So if a client reaches out to you, it'll literally look like what time, what keywords you wrote in that email, and it'll have it reply email. Then they can reply, schedule a meeting. It does everything for you, so you don't have to do a thing. I know somebody who uses it for her whole business. The whole business is run on
Yeah,
that.
when they first started, it was
Yeah.
like $25 a month.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
way more than that.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
it does everything. It's insane. But I do have a question. Maybe you guys, Alicia mentioned it, so maybe she can answer it, or maybe you guys. I used to use self-employed, and I still use it because it keeps track of my traveling. And I do travel a lot, and I drive around a lot to film locations. And no one has time to write that down. The beauty of self-employed is it takes the GPS on your phone, and it'll say, was this a personal trip or a business trip? Whether it's a trip to the gas station, you can put personal. Now, do you get that on QuickBooks Online as well? Oh.
It's on
Yeah.
it's on the app, and you have the option to turn it on or off, and it tracks all of your trips, and you just go back and say business
Yeah.
or personal. You just swipe right for personal, left for business.
Yeah, that's, okay.
So that's another thing. It tracks your mileage.
Yeah,
you
it
know.
tracks your
Yeah.
mileage, those write-offs are great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Everyone's great.
Yeah,
I do it all the time when I do my taxes.
my method's a little less exact than that. If I look on the calendar and I see I had a gig in Wethersfield,
Yeah.
I'll look up the mileage and I'll say, it was a back and forth trip, and then I can figure out what the mileage is from there. But that's manual. It takes
Yeah, I'd
longer.
rather use the AI
Yeah,
all day.
yeah. So in the state of Connecticut, in terms of types of taxes that are paid or owed, one of the big ones here is personal property tax, and that's for an artist or anyone who has a business. It's all of your stuff. It's your equipment, it's your supplies, it's all of the things. It's easier when you are renting commercial space because it's obviously everything in that space. When you're working at home and you're claiming a home office exemption, then you have to kind of figure out what of your own possessions at home count and which ones don't. When my husband and I had studios at home, we did pay personal property taxes because we had both filed for DBA designation, and then that triggers your municipality to send you that form in the mail. So that was, I'm used to doing it. It's, none of that's fun either, but it's all necessary. One thing that I know, and you guys may not have to pay this, but as a completely self-employed person with no regular income, I have to pay self-employment tax every year, right? So if you get a paycheck with a pay stub, it always has a box for Social Security and Medicare that's called FICA. And when you're self-employed, you have to pay that yourself every year. And so you pay it once a year, so the number is always big as opposed to getting it taken out of your paycheck. When you get a paycheck and you work for an employer, you pay half of FICA and the employer pays half of FICA. When you are self-employed, you pay all of FICA. So you owe 15.3% of your income in self-employment tax. Luckily, half of that is tax deductible. The other half is not. So you do get, you owe it, and then you get a deduction for it. And this is applicable to anyone that's self-employed that makes over $400 a year. The threshold's really low. That was the $400 that we were talking about before. You'll also owe state income tax, federal income tax, and if you sell goods, you will owe sales tax as well. And some services are taxed depending on what state you're in and what the services are. And the legislators change them from year to year. So it's like, it's on us individually to keep track of that and to know what we owe. But I know Kristin knows a whole lot more about sales tax than I do.
Oh, yay. Love talking about sales tax. So if you're just starting up, you want to go to the state of Connecticut's website and register and start your business. And that's going to be at business.ct.gov. As far as paying for your taxes and getting a sales tax ID, that's going to be at the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services, and that's going to be, it's basically a portal, and it's called My Connect CT. They've made it, it's light years better than it used to be to pay your sales tax online. If you're just starting a business, just getting your sales tax, what the state tends to do is start charging you monthly, which frankly is a real pain in the butt. Because if you're a small business, to go in and remember every month when you have zero sales to file a zero sales tax return, it's a pain. But just know that after 12 to 18 months, the state will more than likely say, oh, gee, they're not making that much money, now you're on an annual. So, like, I pay annually. Now, that has its benefits, and then it's not great benefits in that at the end of every year, I owe all the sales tax that everybody's paid on my jewelry for the whole year. So it can be a really big number. You know, you've already more than likely spent that sales tax. So planning for that is definitely a great idea. And as far as the other taxes, just trying to see here. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any questions on property tax or sales tax yet?
Not necessarily the tax, but on the forms you're saying it asks, you know, for your social security number, whatever. As a sole proprietor, a lot of people don't know that they can get an EIN number to protect.
Try it again, because you can't. I don't think you can. You have one? Because now the IRS is not issuing them unless you form.
I've had it for some years, and instead of now when every time I fill out a W-9 form, I put my EIN number because I wasn't comfortable putting my social security number.
Right.
So they're just tied together.
Right.
So
I
when
think
file, they
if
get
you
EIN.
go on now and try, they won't let you.
Okay.
It's interesting. I actually recently went on to try, just because I was like, you know, it makes sense. Maybe I should just see if, you know, and you used to be able to.
I know somebody
And
did
so
that one a few months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try it again. Maybe
Yeah.
there was something that
I would
was.
say try again because
glitchy.
for years I was just using my social security number.
They
And
asked
then it was
they
that
asked
pretty-
certain questions, so perhaps I didn't fall into what they needed,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe your friend
It's
did.
been years since
Yeah, I
I've
don't
done
know.
it, so.
Yeah,
But it's a good way to protect
It would be-
your personal
right. I agree.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you have any comments? No? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I had an LLC. I get income out of that for the business, but then my art goes through a sole proprietorship.
Mhm.
But I use the same equipment for both. Where would it be best for me to use, or which one should own the property basically? Which one should I do property tax on?
I would say whatever business can afford to pay the property tax.
Okay.
Whatever one's making the most income. You need to check with an accountant on this, but I think that you probably could create whatever percentage you use the equipment for with the other business. You'd have to do 2 property tax returns. It would make very little sense, but I think if there was some way you wanted to take a deduction somehow and make it more creative, you'd have to talk to an accountant.
Another question.
Yep.
What if break on my taxes, would it be better if I take all my business equipment and put it under property tax of that situation, which is the sole proprietorship?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're using it here, if you're using it for that purpose in your rented space.
Right.
Yeah, I do. So in order to get a tax abatement, you have to file papers with the state. And so you get the tax abatement based on the paperwork you've already filed. You would have to refile the entire package of paperwork, again, to get the new equipment covered by the tax abatement.
Right.
Yeah, so that's just something to think about. You'll have to decide whether it's worth it or not to go through the hassle of that.
All right.
So, yeah, it could be. It might be, it might not be. It's up, up to you.
My debt to my studio.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Erika, do you want to talk about the different types of income that there are?
Sure, money, money, money coming in. Okay, that's the good thing. So different types of incomes. There are grants. I will say very specific to grants. We've talked a little bit about systems, so I just want to plug this in here. Save all of the grant award letters that you get. In our organization, we take a picture and we file it in Google Docs. There's other systems that you can use. It's just a good checks and balance. I've been in positions, not with the Cultural Alliance, but in other organizations where people want a copy of the letter that they've sent you. And so just be mindful of that. It's a record system for yourself. And it also will include the terms and agreements, because if you are not spending all of that income, there's always that really tiny lettering that will tell you you have to give the money back. And a lot of people don't remember that when they are going through the finances on a monthly or quarterly basis. So if you get a grant for $50,000, even $5,000, it's for something specific generally, because we all know general ops, it's hard to come by. But if you go and you maybe facilitate like a muraling and it only cost $3,000, technically and legally you have to give back the money you didn't spend. So I just want to overstate that, because I have heard of people being caught in scenarios where they didn't give the money back and then they had to give the money back, and when they gave, they didn't have it, right? Because you generally just use it for something else. Right. So that is just a pro tip. Please be mindful of that. Also with your sales, I think it's good practice. I itemize everything. At the Cultural Alliance, we have different kinds of memberships. So we use Stripe, we use PayPal, there's Venmo. We have all kinds of systems. And then that's generally the documentation that the bookkeeper and I sit with, and we bucket each type of sale. This way, if you're doing it again on a monthly or quarterly basis, when you get to the end of the year, right now, when you want to be just drinking some spiked eggnog, you don't have to worry about doing that when you don't feel like it. So just do it ahead of time. Commissions, same thing, licensing, awards and prizes. I think all of that kind of, again, if you're getting income in any one of those instances, just make sure that you're connected into whatever group is giving you the funds and you're all on the same page. Royalties, I'm actually going to pause, or I'll just, maybe one of you can touch on that, because I don't have so much experience with royalties. Teaching and speaking fees, I will say have a consistent price point. That's helpful for yourself, so you're not kind of just flustered when people ask you to speak. Have that already thought about prior to making commitments, and then when you have that income, again, make sure that you have that appropriately documented where you've spoken. It's always good practice just to have a small gauge number of the population, how many people, etc. Crowdfunding, I have a love-hate relationship.
It's taxable though, yeah.
Yes. It's also a lot of work to keep track.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing that I think a lot of even organizations struggle with. GoFundMe, I think about even like giving days. If there's a small amount, like if there's a $10 giving day, it is very laborious to keep track of that income. So it's not to say don't do it, but I think the practice that I have is to work with another person, because you can get inundated very quickly. For us as an organization, we're doing an annual appeal. So you need like a daily system. And I say, don't let that kind of income lapse because you will forget something. And again, if you get audited, that'll probably be bad for you. And I don't have much on subcontractor payments. It's just not something in our universe, but I feel like
that is when you're part of a larger project and there's a big payment going to an organization and then they're paying you as a subcontractor. Don't assume that you don't owe taxes on it because you think that maybe the larger organization paid it. If you got the money, you're liable for the taxes. And for the royalties, I get royalties for books that I've written. They're paid quarterly, and I get a statement from the publisher every quarter, and at the end of the year, I get a 1099. And so for me, that makes it easy. Like you all have the ability when you get paid royalties to ask for an audit, so they're usually really careful with paperwork, but it is counted as income. I mean, all of this stuff is counted as income, and things like a grant or even your refund, when you get a refund back, that's income.
That's income, right.
Because you paid it and then you got it back, but now it's yours again, so now you owe taxes on it again. That kind of bouncing back. Anything that's coming in. And just to clarify, the tax code changed last year, and they're really enforcing it this year, that if you've received any money through Venmo or PayPal that's over $600, that is now reported to the IRS. It used to be honor system, and now Venmo and PayPal will be generating 1099s for everyone who has an account with them, and they will be sending you a 1099. Actually, Venmo doesn't send it to you. You have to go to the website, log into your account, download and print it, and then you have your 1099. And
Cash App as well.
I'm sorry?
I think Cash App as
Oh, Cash App as well. Yeah, I don't use that one. But yeah, all of these. I mean, that was the rule that changed with the 2022 taxes. So it 100% is in effect for 2023. I often would forget about that money. Like it's play money. So I don't really think about it. And I forget that it's income, and I would forget, until the last minute, because of course I did count it, to count it. But anything over $600, that's the threshold. Anything over $600 that you've made during the entire year, not one transaction, counts as income that has to be collected on a 1099. And if you are submitting your taxes and the IRS has received their copies of 1099s throughout that month of January, and you're missing one and it doesn't match up with their records, that will set off a red flag with them, and they'll contact you and want to find out why. And ask me how I know that, because one year I could not find the one from Social Security for my husband who collects Social Security, could not find that damn form. And that's a big one. The government sent it to us and I couldn't find it. And of course they had a record of that. And there's no easy way to download one of those at all.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because this is something that I want to say more for like younger artists, because these platforms were kind of designed in a way where you may want all of them, like the suite of cash services. With this stipulation, less is more. So it may be easier when you're out at a festival or a fair to say, like, I take yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to your point, managing the system, it's not as helpful because we all do forget. So I just encourage people to pick one or two so that you're not necessarily forgetting and leaving something out, and then you're kind of caught in a situation where you're accountable for something that you don't remember itemizing.
Yeah, exactly. Do we have any questions about income? What counts as income, what doesn't?
When it comes to using those cash services, since now they are getting tracked, what if I'm splitting a meal with people over the year? Do we have to go in and manually separate them from the other?
Yeah, all of them have the ability to add something to the memo section, so you would definitely want to do that. And I would have to go and look to see how you would tell Venmo or PayPal or Cash App which part of your transactions were income and which ones were like friends and family.
Because
right?
The memo, it kind of feels like when people try to copyright things by mailing it to themselves.
Yeah.
It's not really, it doesn't
Right.
work all the time.
Right.
So I don't know if that really works.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I would imagine that looking at their terms and how they figure it out, there may be a way to edit before the 1099 is generated. It's generated typically between January 1st, and it has to be mailed by January 31st. So the window is pretty small, like it's the week between Christmas and New Year's, basically, to do any editing of it. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even before they announced that they were gonna start tracking those, I stood clear of them when it came to transactions. I think when you're managing money coming in and out, keeping it as minimal as possible. So even when it comes, I have Square, I have PayPal, and I have Zelle, which is attached to my business account. So if I need to pay anybody or anybody needs to pay me, they can send it directly to my Zelle because that is already in my account. It shows up in my QuickBooks as a transaction, and I can just mark what it is. Same thing with Square and PayPal. They are attached to my actual QuickBooks, so I can track it that way. I'm not attaching my Cash App, my Venmo. So Cash App, Venmo, PayPal I do, it is attached, and I always have used PayPal. That account can be attached to your tracking system if you have an online tracking system. But the other ones I steer clear of just because I'm like, this is just more for me to manage. And so if you have Square or PayPal, people can pay by credit card on either one of those. Like it doesn't have to be. And I think you want to make it convenient for your customers.
I don't do any business through Venmo.
Right. I split meals and stuff through that, but it never hits 600. I don't go out that much, so it never hits that amount. But I think that people just need to, yes, we want to make it convenient for our customers, but not inconvenient for ourselves.
Right.
And so just limit yourself and say, I don't have Cash App, I don't have Venmo, but you can pay me via Square, PayPal. I can say, I just tell my customers, no, I don't take payments via Venmo and Cash, just because it's more inconvenient for me, and I'm not trying to put myself through that level of stress.
Right.
You can say no. I'm just
Right.
saying.
Yeah, no, you can say no. That's true. Well, when I teach internationally, it's very hard to bring a check back to the U.S. So the options are usually pretty limited. There are things like you could have a wire, and I've done that, and it takes freaking forever,
I did
right?
that last year.
Yeah. But quite a number of places where I've taught internationally pay with PayPal. And there's no fee, and it arrives the same day, and the currency exchange is done automatically, and they're not hanging on to the money like the bank is to try to float and make some money off of it. So some years, I've got a lot of income coming in through PayPal if I'm teaching internationally, and I do have a couple of clients who do pay me by Venmo, but I do keep track in the memo section. I'll write down what they all are. I think last year was the first year that I really had to figure out what was income, actual income generated versus friends and family, sending money back and forth for dinner or whatever it is. I do know my accountant said his advice always is, and I think it's just hard, in practical purposes, especially when you're 100% self-employed, they always tell you don't commingle your money, right? Your business money and your personal money should be separate. But when you're completely and totally self-employed, your money's your money, right? And so your bank account could have things coming out of it that could be groceries one day and art supplies the next day. And it could have money coming in that's, $40 from your aunt for your birthday and, a payment from a client. So I feel like I keep good enough records to be able to keep track of what the money is coming in, what the money is going out, that I can justify what each one of those things is. And I don't have a separate bank account, and the money is mingled because I don't sit at the end of the week and go, well, this week I'm going to pay myself this much money, and then I can use that for groceries and rent and whatever else. It just for practical purposes, it just doesn't work that way. There isn't enough of it. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, sure. So I have a friend who's a client, and she does the way you're thinking, but she actually does it in QuickBooks, and I set it up for her so that she has her whole QuickBooks it's all a personal section and a business section, and she just like you do online, just checks where, selects where everything goes, so that actually she has a really clear view of personal versus business. So it can happen in a way that's not super, super complex, just so you know.
I have a business account that is attached to my personal account, because I was doing it that way and it was driving me crazy, because I am not organized enough. Know your strengths and weaknesses, people. I am not organized enough to sit down and decide what, like electronically, just swipe, that's a lot easier for me. I also don't attach, even though my business account is attached to my personal account, my personal transactions are not downloading to QuickBooks, because I do not want to have each one of those. But what I do is, when I have money come in, because all of my income is from self-employment, everything I make goes into my business account. I then will just transfer whatever, which is a pain in the butt too, but it's less of a pain in the butt to me than having to sit there and individually, but for a long time, and I didn't even know how to do it for the longest time. And it was like, if you just go to City Hall and register as a DBA, then you can go and open a bank. I was like, because everybody was sending me checks in my business name, and I was like, I can't cash these. So I had to end up opening an account in my business name, because then otherwise I was getting checks that I couldn't cash. And I just attached the accounts together, so they're one can connect to the other. And I could transfer back and forth, but I wish I was organized enough to sit there. I'm not.
Like, I have my business account where all the income gets sent to, but then I just sell myself, and there's no fee from the business to the personal. Sometimes if I know bills are coming up, I add up the bills, I go, okay, $1,200 I need this week, I'll sell myself. And then I will use the memo, I'll write salary. And this way, when I do have to do the adult stuff, I can just see, all right, this is what I paid myself, and then,
Are they with the same bank though? Your personal and your,
no,
okay.
separate banks.
See, mine is the same bank, so I don't have to sell.
Yeah, I don't, you can still Zelle, even if they're separate or the same bank, you can Zelle. And it's just easier, Zelle doesn't take the fee.
Yeah.
And it gets there instantly, and so literally my business account, there's nothing personal on it, and it made it so much easier that way.
Same.
And I only transfer when I have personal things I know I'm going to spend it on. So it kind of helps.
I just need to make more money.
Same here. Same.
We all do.
Kristin, do you want to talk about expenses, and then
Sure.
Erika and I can jump in with anything that we know about?
That sounds great. So Jane has compiled, with our help, a list of expenses, and starts with obviously your supplies and your materials, everything that you use to create your artwork, and then equipment, which is a little challenging because typically you want to depreciate your equipment that you purchase, so you can't write it off as an immediate expense. There are some guidelines with the IRS. I can't quote them right now. So there's some things you can. It's a certain dollar amount, and regardless, I can get that information for anybody who wants it. I just consciously forget it. Rent. So you can deduct your rent. You can also, if you have a studio in your home, you can write off the business use of your home. The way that works is there's a simplified deduction now. So if you wanted to, you could just list what their simplified dollar amount is, which is $5 for 300 square feet. The IRS will give you a deduction of $1,500 for the year, which isn't that much, really, when you think about it. So if you're using a large portion of your home, what you want to do is identify the square footage of your home, and then how much space you're actually using, add up your mortgage, your utilities, insurance, everything that you can think of that would be your overhead, and then divide it by the percentage of the space you're using, and deduct that on your taxes.
Booth fees also count for rent.
And yes, booth fees would be listed in there.
If you go to a craft show or something,
Yep.
or if you vend somewhere, that counts as rent.
Right. Let's see, commissions paid to galleries or agents, entry fees, commercial insurance and health insurance, special clothing and equipment, anything that you're using for your artwork, online services like website hosting, email, software subscriptions, travel for research. So I typically take a trip once or twice into Manhattan to go to museums to be inspired. That is something I can write off. So I even write off the portion of the meal that I have. Business meals, there are limits. You don't want to have a ton of meals on your tax return because you will be audited. However, what I will do is I'll save some receipts for meals throughout the year, and because I'll forget that, one of those meals is my annual meeting. And so I will take one of those meals, I'll list my husband because he's sort of my advisor, and I write off 50% for that one meal. So I don't write off a ton for meals. I do write off, meals are also the food that you serve people in your studio, save all those receipts. They are only deductible by 50%, but it's worth saving. If you have a loan, you can write off the interest for the loan. Professional services, so your accountant, coach, website design, photographer. Your business miles for 2023 are 0.635 cents per mile, which is a beautiful thing. It can really add up if you have to go somewhere. I will tell you that the mileage you drive to your studio is not deductible. Only the mileage that you're driving to a client or to deliver artwork somewhere else besides your standard day-to-day practice. Marketing costs, ads, business cards, postcards, professional publications, professional membership fees and dues, office supplies, utilities for business use. Your cell phone too. Right, your cell phone too. I take a percentage of my cell phone. I write off every year. Home office deduction, shipping and mailing costs, taxes and licenses, bank fees, equipment rental, bad debt, equipment repairs, and all of the business taxes that we spoke about. Is there anything you can think of beyond that?
Mean that if somebody owes you money at the end of the year, that counts as an expense. So you can take that as an expense. Then if they pay you the following year, you have to count it as income again. But a bad debt is counted as an expense. Yeah. So there's there's so many more expenses than you think about. If you subscribe to a magazine, like I was talking to someone today who does like decorative furniture painting, and I said, if you subscribe to Country Living magazine, you wouldn't necessarily think about that as a professional publication, but it's a publication that she subscribes to and reads to find out about color trends and design and different things like that. That is deductible. Those types of things belong to the Cultural Alliance, is tax deductible for all of us. So we should all belong.
I love the plug. Thank you.
I mean, if you pay, like if we were charging you for this workshop, you'd want to save that receipt, and that's something, it's educational expense. Yeah. So that's the other thing did we have educational expenses on here? I don't know if we did. No. Yeah, so that's another one.
The miles to get here tonight would be
right. Correct.
Can I get a copy of that list, just out of curiosity?
It's going to be listed on the resources on the website. Awesome. So yes, for sure. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not necessarily a business expense, but a lot of us throughout the year might donate. Like I just donated a bunch of stuff, and I am a sole proprietor.
Mm-hmm.
So technically I'm donating to an organization that gives me a receipt for donation. We can write that off too, no? Can we put that in?
Donations,
It's
depending on how much
tricky.
it has to do with net income. There's some years I hit the threshold for that, and some years I don't hit the threshold for that. I always save the receipts, I give it to my accountant, and I say, if it counts, and if it doesn't, oh well.
It is not the retail value, which is the sad part. It's only the cost of your materials.
Okay.
So it's not a lot. I mean, unfortunately. It doesn't benefit artists to donate, sadly.
Not donate art.
You mean Art Week? Oh, you mean your time? Oh, you're
Just saying.
Oh, see, as a jeweler, I get asked all the time.
No, I mean, I get asked all the time, absolutely not. I'm not donating art anywhere. I might do some this year just because I'm getting rid of stuff, but I'm asking just in general, like as.
Oh, your time.
Not time, it's not a business thing. Like if I'm donating, like if you have stuff that you're getting rid of, you go to Goodwill and you drop off a bunch of stuff and they give you a receipt.
It's the cost of whatever it cost you,
Yeah,
ultimately.
okay.
So what about like cash donations?
Oh, that's totally
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
what point does it actually make a difference? So
Again, it does, it depends on your income. It does depend on your income. There's a certain point that you hit where all of that stuff is deductible, but it's a fairly high number, and below that, none of it's deductible.
Okay.
So it's like, does it pay to be generous if you can't deduct
This
it?
is why rich people donate.
I know.
And I will say that that's something that would not go on your Schedule C or your LLC. It would be that would be your personal tax. So you have an LLC, you're gonna have your LLC, your profits from that as income, and then your tax return. So it really depends on how much your profits were and how much you donated to offset that.
So, as a completely self-employed person, my accountant tells me every single year that I should pay quarterly taxes, estimated quarterly taxes. Just estimate, usually you do it based on the year before. Like you made X amount of money last year, you owed X amount in taxes, divide that by 4, pay it quarterly. He always gives me the coupons. I usually forget until June or July, and I'll pay something. I never pay the whole amount. I usually end up owing something at the end of the year. I'm always so jealous of all my friends who get paychecks and get refunds at the end of the year because they've been paying in like all year long. But I also feel like I had the use of the money all year, and then I just have to suffer in December. Or April, sorry, not in December, in April. So it's something to think about. It's like if you're kind of worried about it, and you're worried about having a big tax bill, or if you have a big tax bill every year, then definitely paying estimated taxes quarterly is a good idea. Again, it's not like a rich people problem, but it definitely is a problem if you are earning and having a higher net income. You can also, to help save yourself some tax liability, you can open, as a self-employed person, you can open a solo 401k. So a lot of corporations, companies, nonprofits will offer their employees a 401k, which is fabulous, and they have matching, and they do all sorts of snazzy things. But you can open one of those yourself, and the tax on that is deferred until you retire. So you don't have the use of the money, but you don't owe the tax on the money either. So if you are making a lot of money and you're looking for a good way to reduce your tax liability, that's a good thing to do. And then our favorite thing to do would be to donate to your favorite cultural nonprofit.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Either way.
It's funny, everybody's doing these like annual drives right now, and it's always like, remember us in your year-end giving. And it's because a lot of people who do have money are looking at their numbers for the end of the year, and they're like, man, I need to get rid of some of my money before the end of the year, so I don't owe that much in taxes. And for a lot of artists, that is not the problem. That is not the problem, that we have too much money. But for a lot of other people, kind of it is. And so that's something to kind of think about. And I don't know, does anybody else have a strategy to what to do when they have too much money?
Not too much money. One day. I actually know, I don't do this, but I know somebody who actually has a bank account where they put all of the taxes, like when they sell something, whatever the sales tax is, they put it into this account.
Yeah.
When
My
they
daughter
receive a
does
check,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so when they owe taxes, they have this account where they could just write a check and that's all the taxes they owe.
Yeah.
Not me. I don't pay quarterly. I'm like you, Jane. In April, I'm like, what do I have to pay? And then I just send them all the money. I don't send quarterly taxes, but it's a good idea.
Yeah. No, it is a good. The years I remember to do it, I'm always so happy. I'm like, past Jane, you are brilliant, right? But the years I forget, I'm mad at past Jane. So. Yeah, discipline. Well, and that's part of being like a self-employed person, right? Is the discipline, and most of the time you're like hustling so hard that discipline kind of gets lost sometimes. And so the more systems you can set up to keep track of expenses, like setting up your QuickBooks, the easier it makes it, so that you're not forgetting that. I have almost every bill I have is set up for auto pay because I kept forgetting. Like I would get busy and then it would be the 15th of the month and I'd go, did I pay that? I can't remember if I paid it. So even though, some people are nervous about that, it helps me because then I can concentrate on the hustle and not on some of the other parts of it. And I think that the three of us actually probably file differently too. As I was saying before, I have an accountant that I've been working with for nearly 30 years, long time. He works with a lot of artists and writers and art organizations, and I was emailing with him before this presentation tonight, and he mentioned that I'm one of the most organized artists that he deals with, because and my whole thing, like, I can remember talking to my husband years ago. He would go to, before we were married, he would go to an accountant with a literal shoebox full of receipts and hand his accountant the shoebox. And it would be up to his accountant to sort it and do all the math and figure it all out. And that just, like, no, we're not doing that. So I take like 4 days, I lay it all out on the table, I do all the printing, I figure it all out, I write it all down. And it's very analog, and I write things, and I create basically a Word doc for my accountant, and I just copy and paste the one, or duplicate from the year before, and just change the numbers because they change, right, every year. So I've got different 1099s, I've got different income that's not on 1099s, a different amount of income. I've got the, rent might be different, utilities might be different. I might have traveled a lot one year and very little another year. And so the numbers kind of change and they're all over the place. But that basically PDF that I send him, plus the copies of the 1099, are really all he needs. And then he kind of just goes and he does it, and it's great. And he's recently started using the portal on QuickBooks, where it's like you can't go to the next screen until you fill out parts of it with questions or upload documents or whatever it is, and we can do questions and answers back and forth through it. But I feel like that is money, for me, that's really money well spent. I don't want to know tax code. I don't really care about any of that stuff. I want to know, like, I will do enough research to know what's deductible and what's not. But he's great because he'll say, all right, it looks like you're going to owe this much. Do you have anything else? Have you remembered this? Have you remembered that? What about that? Wow, you traveled a lot. Your miles look really high. Should we take some of those off? That not count some of the things. And he, he'll tell me, like, this looks good, this doesn't look good. And I think that advice is really super crazy valuable. And I'm so happy to pay him to do it. And I live in terror that he's going to retire.
So I use TurboTax, and interestingly, just listening to you, I'll talk about how I set it up, but when you go through TurboTax and you're entering things, it asks you those questions. Did you forget this? Did you forget that? It'll tell you something doesn't seem right. This is way more than last year. And that the beautiful thing about TurboTax is that it keeps all your prior information, so that when you're entering it, you can really look at the last year's and just be like, oh geez, why did I write off that much mileage last year? That's not right. And so you can correct yourself. But what I do is, so for Metro Art Studios, we keep track of everything in QuickBooks, and so it's very simple. At the end of the year, we like you just hand off. I basically send my QuickBooks to the accountant, and that's all I have to do, which is a beautiful thing. And so any business who's keeping the QuickBooks up to date, it's really not that difficult, even if you're going to do the taxes in TurboTax, because you just run a report and you enter all the information. I do a similar thing to what Jane does, but I save all my receipts in my files for each item, and then I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I just sit there and I just type in each receipt, and it adds it right up, and I have all my different categories. If anybody ever wants my Excel spreadsheet, I'm happy to share it. I've actually did a presentation on one of these, so I have a really super duper one that's very fancy that I'm happy to share. And so for the income, same thing. I just say I have my nice little pad with everything in there, and I get my any kind of 1099s or any check stubs or everything. It's all in one pile, pretty simple. And then I just spend the time with TurboTax for a couple $100, and it's done. I also do taxes for lots of family members. So I've learned all the ins and outs of TurboTax, regardless of your age. Retired?
Yeah, I can tell you, my brother-in-law works for TurboTax.
Oh.
So you can get a lot of personalized one-on-one help if you're willing to pay.
Yes, they will answer questions. If you pay a little bit more, they'll audit. At the end of actually when you're done, they'll give you your score for whether or not you'll be audited, which is great. You know, so if it seems like you're going to be audited, they'll give you suggestions they'll tell you why. So you could go and you can go back and you can change things, which is very helpful. But
I mean, I think I've been in both situations that both of you described. So I'd say personally, before I got married, I did my own taxes, and it was easy and straightforward. And then I married someone who has 2 businesses, and I was like, no, I can't. Immediately no. And so we do have an accountant, and he is wonderful. So I agree with you, Jane. It takes the headache off of you, and find someone that's used to working with your demographic. So we have businesses, we have a nonprofit, he knows the ins and outs, and he finds those deductibles. So even things that we don't think about, he's like, okay, well, you do have this subscription. I'm like, aha, you're right. So I would advocate for people to do that, especially if you're an artist and you're married to someone who is an artist. It just makes life a little bit easier. And then for sure, at the Cultural Alliance, it's very easy. Just having someone who's a bookkeeper, it's very automated, it's straightforward, and it's helpful. And so you do have a note here to save your 1099s. So if we had like a billboard, we would put that on there, because I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. If you're an artist, like that will be the thing that you need to do to not have a headache at the end of the tax season.
And sometimes you're getting one from someone who's not organized and they don't send it to you in time, or it gets sent to the wrong address and you have to chase it down, and that's irritating. But it did go to the IRS, so you do have to take the time to chase it down and find it and have it.
And I will just add that if it's incorrect, they can change it. So you just need to let them know right away.
What happens if they don't send you one, and can you just write down what you got paid from them and just?
Yes, yep. Yeah, you don't need one, even if you were paid over $600.
Got it.
The
Yeah.
IRS knows.
Yeah, I mean, they more than likely, they probably filed it.
Right here. I'm right talking about you. I report all the stuff that you not you. I do have a question. I had an accountant, so I had lost some 1099s during my move. And I was working with an accountant, and he said, I'll get them for you. And he got 1099s from like 2-3 years ago. Do all accountants have the ability to do that?
I have no idea. It must be something with the IRS that they're able to retrieve somehow.
Yeah, it's the IRS. They just go to the IRS, they request it, and they get it.
Okay. Yeah, you can do that.
The other thing is, if you are paying someone yourself $600 or more, you need to do a 1099 and then a summary 1096 for them. So if you have somebody that you're paying, that you're contracting,
Another
subcontract.
thing that QuickBooks Online does for you.
Yeah.
You just add, if you have QuickBooks Online and you're contracting somebody, you just put their information in, and you can have those 1099s sent to them. And they automatically send it to the IRS.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions about filing?
Everyone's like, ugh.
Everybody's ready to do their taxes.
I know.
Well, somebody else does mine for me.
I will say you guys made it a lot less scarier than it seems. A lot less scary.
So, but the one thing I will add is that if you're self-employed, if you make $400 or more, you must file a tax return. So I was doing a little research, and I just think that this is so sad, because as an individual, if you're employed and you have an employer and they pay you, if you're single under the age of 65 and you make almost $13,000, you don't have to file. So, I mean, you've taken out your taxes, but they're not requiring to. But if you make $400 as you're being self-employed, you have to file. It's crazy, but it's true. So don't forget, if you have income, especially if somebody 1099s you, or even if they're sending you a check and it's $400, you should file.
And if you are in either one of those situations right now, you live on the street. $400. Where do you live?
In your mom's basement.
2023, where do you live? Like,
Yeah.
no way.
But I think there's some people who have a job, and then they're also an artist.
That makes sense.
And so they're only making $400, and they think, oh, I don't need to file a Schedule C, but oh, yes, you do.
$400 or more, they gotta do it.
And you have to file the Schedule SE, which is the self-employed tax
But
schedule too.
wouldn't that be one of the individuals that the IRS decides they're a hobbyist? Because if they're only making $400 a year,
It takes them a few years to decide that. It can take them up to 5 years to decide it. And in the meantime, you owe 15.3% of your $400. I do also know from a friend's experience that if you have an LLC and you don't show a profit for a certain number of years, the IRS determines that you are no longer qualified to be an LLC, and they force you to dissolve it. That cannot be one again. You would have to start all over again. Yeah, yeah. So
That's a good point, which goes back, I think, to the beginning of really being intentional about figuring out what it is you need to do. There are so many people that I know who have an LLC and they don't need it. It's just not necessary. So think about your intention and the longevity of your artistry, because you can kind of get caught in a situation where, the government will tell you you're not who you think you are.
yeah. A really good insurance policy can do a lot for you that an
Exactly.
LLC makes things too complicated for. You know,
Correct.
they could do much better.
So for my consulting business, when I was an LLC, I spoke with my accountant and about formation, and that it was the best way for me to pay myself. And I think this is a really reasonable question you should ask your accountant. So during the year, I would take draws, and I would be paid full amount. And then it had a positive tax ramification for the business. But I think it is something to really think about. If you're making, say you're making, I would say anything more than $20,000 a year, it's worth having your accountant look at your formation to see if you should become an LLC. Because I think that there are tax benefits to paying yourself for it. Just a little tidbit.
Yeah, that's great. Do we have any other questions or comments on the topic of taxes and getting ready for taxes? No.
I think
yeah.
it's the most laughing I've ever
I know,
heard on this subject.
We found a way to make taxes fun.
Funny, yeah, exactly.
I don't know, Daniel and Gary were pretty funny.
That's right. So we had a lovely meeting the other day where we laid out all of the topics for 2024, and we are so excited about what is coming. And so just as a little preview, January 3rd is the next one. So right after holidays, back to work mode, we're going to be talking about writing your artist statement. And that's going to be a really great one. I'll have a couple of really good writers here. Erika knows lots about writing and will be instrumental to all of that as well. We should have some handouts, like worksheets for people. I actually have a really fun Mad Libs artist statement. That's kind of fun to do too. So we can have some fun with that topic. I know it's a hard thing to do, like taxes, but it's another thing. Like my mom always says, it's character building. So we're going to build some character in 2024, but we're very, very excited about the topics that are coming, and we hope you can join us on January 3rd. And as soon as the Eventbrite is up, an email will be going out from both the Culture Alliance and Metro Art Studios to remind people to sign up for the new series in the new year. And we thank you all for joining us tonight.